Hey, welcome to another episode of What's That All About? So, today we're going to be looking at remote viewing. And I found this kind of fascinating because it's the CIA's version of spooks. And the only reason why they call them spooks, though, is because A, they don't understand what they're doing because they're psychics and they can't touch the results of what they're getting. And it's because it's kind of like an alternative science, right? I don't know if I can call it science, but by definition, remote viewing is the practice of seeking impressions about a distant or unseen object, purportedly sensing with the mind. Now, typically, a remote viewer is expected to give information about an object, event, or person, or location that is hidden from physical view and separated by some distance. So that can mean a lot of things, and it can be underground things too. I mean, they are able to get to some interesting places. So let's get started. At the beginning of the Cold War, the idea of using psychics was starting to gain some traction because the Soviets, it was rumored, had already kind of started to generate their own results from remote viewing. CIA didn't really know what this was. So they immediately wanted to look into it. They did a brief investigation called Project Ultra, which, didn't go very far, didn't reap many results, but then they heard that they confirmed that the Russians were using psychics. So in 1972, what became a long-term research project, I guess you could call it, at the Stanford Research Institute was introduced by two physicists by the name of Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff. Now, they asserted to the CIA that they had found several people that could conduct sessions of remote viewing successfully. And by successfully, I mean either 35 to 40% results being able to be confirmed as positive. The two individuals that they singled out were Ingo Swann and Pat Price. Now, their results ranged in 60 to 65% positive results, so they were really sought after for certain things by the CIA. The first one I'm going to go to is Ingo Swann. He was interesting. He was one of the co-creators, along with Russell and Harold, of the remote viewing, more specifically the Stargate Project. Now, Stargate Project was a secret U.S. Army unit established in 1978 in Fort Meade, Maryland. The DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and SRI Intelligence International, used this project to investigate the potential for psychic phenomena in military and domestic intelligence applications. Now, Swann, being a bit of a control freak, he is credited with the idea of controlled remote viewing. Now, it's a process where the viewers would see a location only through getting latitude and longitude. Now, because of how high the CIA's, guidelines were or acceptance was of this program at all, they needed to put some guardrails on Swann because he was part of the creating this program, but he also had to be a participant. So in order for it to be more unbiased, it's Harold and Russell had to put certain rules in place for Swann to follow, which Swann didn't like, but he did do it. So, I mean, his success rate was at like 65%. So it was like you didn't want to scare him off and have him go somewhere else, work for somewhere else, So anyway, one of Swann's major claims, which I found so fascinating, was that there were alien bases on the dark side of the moon. So there was a man named Mr. Axelrod who approached Swann for the CIA to conduct these sessions and asked him to astro project to the dark side of the moon. Now, astro project might sound familiar because back a couple episodes when I talked about the power of 3, I talk about leveling up your consciousness. These guys were at the top level. They could put their consciousness anywhere they wanted, like anywhere, miles, hundreds of thousands of miles, didn't matter. Because Swan was also known to have seen the rings around Jupiter before they were even confirmed. He saw what the story was on Mars. I mean, he's done a lot. I'm not going to get too far into it because this video would have gone on for hours. But I'm zeroing in on the dark side of the moon because I've been fascinated by it. So in his session, he was on the dark side of the moon and started to see these structures. Like he was confused at first. And then he said to Mr. Axelrod, I feel like I'm looking at a construction site. There's like something that looks like a tractor over here, and there's other structures. And I'm seeing these like huts kind of things that are built. They have windows and there's like a glow coming in from inside. So he went closer and started to look into the windows, and he saw about a dozen or so alien humanoid looking creatures, beings, whatever. And as he's looking at them, they all stop what they're doing and they turn and they look at him. And he says in his session back with Mr. Axelrod, he says, they can see me. Swan was terrified. And Axelrod didn't want to panic him any further, but he said, as soon as you can, get out of there, bring your consciousness back. He was totally trying to be deep breaths, just get him back. So when Swan came back into his body, his consciousness was all set. He said, did you know they were psychic? As you were sending me into a place where they were, did you know that was going to happen? And Axelrod did not answer his questions. He just said, your services are no longer required, and sent him on his way. Now, Swan was followed after that. He claims in a book he wrote, Penetration, he goes into way more detail about what he saw on the dark side of the moon and all these things. But he also talks about an encounter he had with these twins that ended up, you find out they're CIA operatives that are kind of following him to make sure that he's not, taking what he learned from the dark side of the moon into anybody else's hands, right? But he also encounters this gorgeous woman, as he describes her, and he actually describes her pretty graphically. I'm just going to leave it at she was a gorgeous woman and he was very drawn to her. But then Axelrod appeared and said, you stay away from her. She's very dangerous. Turns out they believe that she was a Russian operative, probably trying to, compromise him. But anyway, if this sounds like something you'd want to read more about, I would highly recommend getting Penetration, the book, and see what else he has to say, because he's fascinating. The other remote viewer, Pat Price, he was a former Burbank, California police officer who participated in a number of Cold War era remote viewing experiments, included he was more technical. He could see things, and his drawings, as you can see here, he's very well known for this specifically. This is a drawing of his. His are is the drawing with the very straight lines, very straight angles. The other one is the actual image that was found behind Soviet lines. So his results were amazing. And, Swan and Price did compete with one another, for their successes, but they weren't enemies. They just competed, because, the CIA paid very well to do these things. And but again, the CIA wanted more proof for everything that they were getting from these guys. So they decided, with some chronicled series of meetings, to give them both independently the same location and see what they both came up with. So as it turns out, they both came back and said, well, we both, each said separately, I found a base, what is this? And it was actually a super secret military facility. And the CIA was like, but we gave you the latitude and longitude of a vacation property. No, they didn't. They lied. And as it turned out, it was proven that they gave them the latitude and longitude to a super secret government facility. So they tried to discredit them, didn't work. Now they wanted more proof. So Price went back at it and came back with code names, secret code names of programs. He came back with labels that were written on files in a locked cabinet. He came back with the personnel names of people that worked at this facility that were highly classified. Now, to his detriment, I think the CIA was more concerned than anything else that because they never really embraced how remote viewing worked, they thought they weren't exactly believers. So they grabbed Price as a contractor because honestly, they wanted to keep an eye on him. And they were also afraid because his reputation had started to gain a lot of recognition in the realm of remote viewing, the Soviets might approach him. That was one of their main concerns. So as it turns out, Pat Price died, okay, on an apparent heart attack in Las Vegas in 1975. It's rumored that he was killed by either the CIA or poisoned by a Russian operative, because I guess the details of his death are very grotesque. I did not want to even know the details, but listen to this. A couple of things happened when his body arrived at the emergency room where they attempted to revive him. A mysterious man showed up with a briefcase. He told the emergency room doctor, I have his most recent EKG results. He had a heart attack. That is what you're going to put down. You're not going to put anything else down. There will be no autopsy, and you will have him cremated immediately. All of these things happened before Pat Price's family or wife was even notified that he had died. It is amazing the power and reach of certain government agencies. Never underestimate that. So just keep that in mind. Just never underestimate what they're capable of. I looked around to see if the United States government was still using remote viewing. The Stargate project ceased in 1995. Swan actually passed away in 2013. The only thing I could find was in 2001, the British Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair, had the Ministry of Defense, MOD, look into getting the Stargate Project handbook to create their own set of remote viewers to try and find and track down Osama bin Laden. Unfortunately, it didn't work. It was a lackluster result. Their remote viewers were terrible, to say the least, and that whole effort had to be abandoned. Now, the only thing I hear about these days is classes that are offered throughout the United States. There's one actually in Utah. I mean, I'm in Idaho, and in Utah, there's a class that's offered for a week, $3,000 to either hone your skills as a remote viewer. A lot of high-priced businesses kind of seek out people that can do this. So you'd be surprised. Or you can learn how to remote view. It's been said that me, everybody has the ability to remote view, as long as we allow our consciousness to level up, as I have called it in the past. But I would really love to know your comments on this, and I hope you like this episode. And if you did, please like and subscribe. And until the next time I see you, stay happy and healthy. Stay weird. Please stay weird. I need the company. And take care. Bye.